Greetings, everybody. Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg tonight. Running a little bit behind. It's one of those Sundays where I kind of got into, that's not drinking, it's called football. And I was watching the very exciting overtime game between the Cleveland Browns. Hey, Reno Healing Massage. Reno Healing Massage. What's happening? Hi. There was a showdown between two Aries, David Carr and Baker Mayfield. Unfortunately, David Carr won. Hello, Robin. How are you? How are you doing tonight? But it was a great, great game. Super, super game. If you enjoy those sorts of distractions. Oh, look who's here. Right on time. There she is. She is the outside queen. Queen of the outside. I can use her tail like a mic. Broadcasting shoot. No, I won't do that. Hey, hello, Jeannie. Hello from Sedona. Hello, Amy D from Northern California. What's going on? Joan from MA. Watch the game too. It was a great game. Hello, Michael. Welcome, Joe Mama. What's happening, Joe? Yeah, it was a fantastic game. Back and forth. I do think the Cleveland Browns got screwed on a play with a spot. It was actually a first down. Dharma Child, good evening. Welcome, Dharma Child. Welcome to our proceedings. I've been really getting into, hey, it's my kitty, Ms. Kitty from Australia. Well, good morning. Happy Monday. Happy Monday down there. I've really been getting into the Rajneesh stuff. It's like I've seen two other documentaries since Wild Wild Country. And there's this one documentary on Amazon called The Guru, the Secretary, and His Assassin, which I highly recommend watching. He's so 80s. He's totally. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 80s, especially a very specific time during the 80s. We're going to get into that tonight. We're also going to get into the Kavanaugh Blasi charts. Just make sure. Okay. Gosh. All right. I hate this. Okay. Unfortunately, I may get a little bit of latency here tonight on the because I've got switched over to 5G, which is a terrible signal for me. And this is what Spectrum does all the time. Rajneesh, fascinating. Yeah, the whole thing that went down between them and the outer community, and I mean the whole thing. There's just so many issues that are colliding in this sort of cultural, religious power atom smasher. Kavanaugh's distraction. They were having a 5G meeting at the White House, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. So one of the things I want to talk. Why don't I just jump into this? Let's get into this thing. The whole thing with Rajneesh, which was so totally fascinating for me, was the fact that there was a period in the 1980s, basically from 1981 to about 1985, where Uranus and Neptune were in the signs of Sag. Excuse me. And this is a really, really important thing to understand. Okay, just from a social and religious and mystical perspective, when we talk about the outer planets and the representation of the outer planets, what they do is they define our cultural mindset, or they can color it, they can shape it. They can also influence to a large degree the cultural relationship with whatever archetypes and energies that the outer planets are participating in. So when you look at that time with Neptune in Sagittarius and Uranus in Sagittarius, and at that time I believe Pluto was right at the edge of Libra, and it gets ready to go into Scorpio in 1985. So this is a very, very interesting time because, number one, there is a trine between Neptune sextile between Neptune and Pluto that's taking place. And when we get into the sextiles with outer planets, it can be very, very profound in terms of the sort of the distribution of energy and the combination of energy that relates to it, right? So, Pluto and Capricorn, bankers, military. Yeah, we're going to get into Pluto and Capricorn tonight. This is on our way over to the three charts that we're going to be looking at. So if you go back during that time in the early 80s, and I was talking about this with Steve and Chris the other day, there was this incredible sense of kind of expansiveness and openness. And I look for things on a cultural level in a lot of ways to define sort of what's happening with the outer planets astrologically. The early 80s were a tough time. Yes, they were a tough time because we were coming out of the 70s and all the bullshit inflation adjustments that Paul Volcker made when he was the head of the Fed. And that was really just a way to keep the last batch of sort of industrial production earning salary down. Okay, that's what they did. Paul Volcker had the interest rates up to like what, 15%, 17%, something like that. And so what they did is they artificially sort of raised those rates. So people who were actually making decent salaries couldn't get low interest loans. Because if they could, it would have catapulted them up to new levels of wealth and power. And of course, the ruling class and the elites don't want that. They want everybody to sort of function at, just above functioning level. Really, that's what they want. Taurus moon had people acting aggressively or off. 18%. That's what it was. It was 18% back in the 70s. And that's why it was a very, very tough time financially. And as a result of that, it eventually caught up. Those high interest rates caught up because businesses couldn't expand. They could not expand. And you had union jobs where people were still making pretty good money, but they couldn't really do anything with it. They couldn't go out and start a new business because the loans were too expensive. They couldn't buy multiple properties because the percentage for the loans were too high. Lots of vets lost their homes too. Yeah, absolutely. This is a very tough time. So, but coming out of that period, this is a really important sort of thing to kind of wrap your head around, right? Because Uranus goes into Sagittarius on a full-time basis. Guess what? That's when Reagan gets elected. That's when Carter winds up going into the house building business. We have this thing, the drama that's going on with the hostages in Iran, which is a very Sagittarian thing. And that ends very quickly, right? That's a very Uranian act. And we know why it ended, because there was a deal being made, but still it falls within the pattern of this time with Uranus and Sagittarius. But if you look at what happens sort of musically, and I was talking about this the other day, is that there's some really incredible music that begins to sort of manifest during this 4-year stretch. And I remember being a pretty big fan of U2 during that time. It was like their first and second records. And the music was almost religious. This is in the sort of in tune with what was going on with Uranus and Sag and Neptune and such. This is before Bono and all those guys got completely corrupted. They still had some innocence left. And you had bands like the Simple Minds who were creating songs like Sanctify Yourself and Don't You Forget About Me. And I mean, Somewhere, Summertime. I mean, really very uplifting, really kind of high vibrational music. Then to me, the song that really epitomizes that time, because we're talking about Sagittarius, right? Big, expansive, and open, is a song called Big Country by Big Country. You guys know that song, right? I mean, what a hopeful, positive, expansive, almost anthemic song. The guy that sang it, unfortunately, passed away. But this is what I'm talking about in terms of the music, right? The Simple Minds were incredible, really, really incredible. So anyway, we look at that time. Even when Reagan comes in, there's a sense of this kind of weird, renewed hope because of what happened with the hostage crisis, and all of it's manufactured, of course, but we have this quick turnaround. It's very quick with Uranus and Sag. So I was looking at that time, and basically 80 to 85 is when Rajneesh starts Rajneesh Param. And Rajneesh has, I believe his sun is around 18 Sagittarius. And Neptune, during the run up to what was going on in the creation of that community, was conjunct his sun for half a decade, basically. So you could go from the middle 70s and take it out to basically to the mid 80s. And he's got Neptune floating around his sun for almost 10 years. So we could go back to 75, kind of a wide conjunction. And he had this amazing grand trine in with Jupiter and Leo up in the 11th house, which is group and community, right? So he was going to be a Leo force. He was going to become the king of his community, no doubt, with Jupiter and Leo in the 11th house. And then Uranus and Aries in the 3rd house, which is very interesting in terms of, being able to process information and the mind. And Rajneesh never had any notes. What was interesting about Rajneesh is he was a professor of philosophy, and he got deeper and deeper and deeper into Eastern religion and Hinduism, and he got deeper into psychotherapy and shamanism. And he became this really interesting sort of figure, the first kind of modern guru who blends psychotherapy with spirituality, ecstasy, with encounter groups, the whole 9 yards. So he has about a decade where Neptune is kind of floating around his sun. And by the way, that Uranus, which is in Gemini, down in the 3rd house, very, very spontaneous, trining Jupiter, which gives him kind of a genius quality, all within a grand trine with his sun in Sagittarius, fire. Okay. So when he had Neptune sort of around his sun for about a decade, then he was a really interesting character. And I think he was open to something. Okay. He was open. He was a big time channel, and it was all fire, right? Because we're dealing with a grand trine and fire. And what happens with Rajneesh, which is fascinating, when you track the chart, it's really, really fascinating. By 1985, Neptune has moved out of Sagittarius and into Capricorn. And he's got like 4 planets in Capricorn. And the descent is rapid. It's rapid. In fact, you can go back to 1984 as Neptune moves towards conjunction with some of his Capricornian planets, and he becomes sucked into this really intense materialistic trip. It's mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. But during that time, again, this is the 80s, right? So we're talking 1981 to 1985, about a 4-year window, that there was profound spiritual energy available at that time. Really, really profound. And I am a witness to that, because that was a time in my life where, I mean, everything was just off the charts. I was seeing auras, I was leaving my body, I was having telepathic experiences, I was doing spontaneous healings, and it was a window, right? I was participating in that window. I'm sure some of you in the chat, or if you're listening to this after the chat, you could go back during that time. And if you're old enough, you'll remember it. It was a very, very powerful time. Now, these windows are really important culturally, because this is how, as a group, we grow. Theoretically, right? Theoretically. So the next time we had kind of a major opening around that was in the 80s, when Pluto was in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, we were still dealing. What was interesting during that time is that Neptune and Uranus, for a period, were in conjunction in Aquarius. So that late 90s period is also a really interesting sort of spiritual window. And I remember the late 90s as being really powerful. I lived on the West Coast, and the .com world was blowing up, and there was this real hope, promise, and hope of spirituality beating technology, beating commerce, beating electronic music. I mean, this was it, man. I mean, the doors were wide open, totally wide open. Well, those doors got slammed shut. And those doors got slammed shut when Pluto went into Capricorn. And that was in 2009. So we had a period where there was some opening, and it was really pre 2001, pre 9/11, 2001. After that, I almost get the sense here. In fact, it's not even getting the sense. I know this. You can go back in history, and you can look at these cycles over and over again, that when we get to a place of really major cultural shift, right? The doors get slammed. We're getting ready, and all of a sudden, boom, the door is slammed, and it's like, okay, this period and phase is over, and you have to adapt and move into something else. So I was looking at that late '80s time, actually early '80s time, and I was trying to sort of fit it to where we are now, because one of the things that I think that is really important is to understand what's happening with the outer planets right now. When we look at Pluto and Capricorn, which is a massive force right now, massive force. Saturn and Capricorn right behind it. We are feeling the weight of the oligarchy. We are feeling the weight of the corporatocratic state. We are feeling the weight of the technocracy. We are feeling the impending weight in whatever is going on with this version of governance, which is under the aegis of Pluto and Capricorn, hanging by a thread in some ways. Because we know, whether we can deduce it astrologically or we can feel it from an instinctual level, that whatever it is we're experiencing is going to end. Okay, it is going to end. Pluto and Capricorn augurs the end of a type of governance, of a type of doing business, of how we relate to these superstructures in our lives. And so it is not like the Pluto and Sag phase, where there was some really interesting and sort of powerful, really powerful transformational energy going out with our beliefs. And, those are, in a lot of ways, that was a very, very prophetic time, especially the late '90s when we had Neptune and Uranus together in Aquarius. But we're not in that place anymore, and that's not to say that you're not a spiritual person. I'm not a spiritual person, that we don't have a thread of spirituality running through all of our lives. But Pluto and Capricorn determines a different type of participation. And we cannot necessarily go back to the 1980s or the 70s. There are pieces and filaments that sort of run through our lives, because theoretically, right, there is no time, theoretically. So there are filaments of these times that run through our lives, and sometimes we could kind of ride those timelines and pick up on energy, which I've been doing, by the way, for the last week, since I kind of got reintroduced. And I'm not a Rajneesh, don't get me wrong. I knew Rajneesh people, but I'm not one. But I sort of was running the rails of that timeline, and I started to get into that energy a little bit. And that was a really, really fascinating experience for me, because what it represents is that even though we can't go back, we can tap in a little bit, and we can begin to feel into that place. Go, oh, yes, I remember this. Why? Because if you've lived through it, it's a part of your life. It's inside of you. We can't retreat and go back, but we can tap into it, run that time rail a little bit, and see where that energy, that spark, and that memory, the genetic and the cosmic and the celestial memory inside of us, where it's all inside of you. It's already happened. This is one of the things that I theoretically teach people about transits. Like when you're going through a really big transit in your life, and a good one, okay, let's say it's positive. Let's not put like a good or bad or definition on it. But if you're going through a really, really positive transit in your life, like for instance, back in the late '90s, I had a Neptune in Aquarius is trining my Mercury in Libra. And man, my psychic ability was off the freaking charts. I mean, it was like completely right. And I knew at some point that Neptune was eventually going to move on and this period was going to leave. But what I tried to do during that time is open myself enough to the point where I could integrate that. And whatever that transit was would become a part of me from that point moving forward. And even transits that are challenging in your life, you could go back in time and look at them and see how you met certain challenges. Because in many instances, those challenges will come around, especially with Saturn, the Saturn squares, oppositions, and conjunctions. So these are potentials, and they're not limited by time and space. However, that said, we are not in that place collectively now. We're not. And what was really fascinating for me when I went back and revisited that piece with Rajneesh is that I realized that the United States of America has absolutely no interest in allowing people from other cultures, or well, let me rephrase this. Okay, they're more than happy to create a very insular community in a part of Michigan where people from another country practice a different religion. It's because number one, they sanction it, they're making money off of it, and they're creating the social topography as a result of it. But if somebody wanted to come in and start their own community, like say for instance Rajneesh, and by the way, Rajneesh and Manan Sheila, particularly Sheila, caused a lot of trouble. The worst thing that they suffered from was spiritual elitism. If they had reached out to the people of Antelope a little bit more and been a little more integrative with the people of the Dales in Wasco County, I think they might have had a chance to stick around. And maybe if they had an agreement that behind the doors of the community they were all orange and burgundy and ochre, but when they would leave, they would look like everybody else and try to integrate, except maybe they'd have an orange purse or wear orange socks or have orange panties or whatever, right? That would have been a smarter thing to do in some ways. But then I realized, though, that really the United States has no business in letting these kinds of communities um, form, put roots down and then proliferate. I mean, they did the same thing, so internally, Rajneesh Param had issues. Don't get me wrong, but there was no way they would ever let those people continue to build whatever they were doing. And they did the same thing with Elizabeth Clare Prophet in Montana, right? They called her a doomsday cult, and they went in and they took care of business with her. They did the same thing with David Koresh down in right up the road here in Waco. So this is the reason I'm talking about this is because when we're dealing with Pluto and Capricorn, the other sign or the sign opposite Capricorn is Cancer. And Cancer is a very, very different vibration, as we know. Capricorn is intense, it is driven, it's a relentless energy. And and when we get into Pluto and Capricorn, we're dealing with extreme versions of that. But the other part of that opposition is also impacted and affected. So when people want to create a community, right, a spiritual community that is very Cancerian, what's going to happen? Well, the United States has Pluto and Capricorn. Do you think that they want that to occur? The answer is no, not really, unless they themselves sanction it, right? And if they do, then they're behind it 100%. It's untouchable at that point. Or what about communities that produce raw milk? I don't know where like the Amish stand with this. I think they've been around enough, but I know that they've had problems creating raw milk and things like that. So again, there's this sort of gravitational field that does not make it easy for people who want to start an intentional community in this country unless the country itself sanctions it. So I was just looking at this and I've seen a number of communities really try to sort of take hold and root, and it just doesn't work here. It doesn't really work. And I think it might have to do with the fact that Pluto and Capricorn is right there in the second house of the US chart. And so what has proliferated more than Cancer, which would be over there in the eighth house, hidden and tucked away? Well, it's been corporations. That has been the culture of this country with Pluto and Capricorn ever since the end of the New Deal. What's really interesting too about the whole Rajneesh thing is that they shipped him off to Oklahoma City. I thought, why did they take him to Oklahoma City? This is a guy. I mean, it was in. Don't you think that there was like a field office or a prison or a jail in Portland or Seattle or Northern California? But they took him to Oklahoma City, right? And it's just weird that this is where the whole McVeigh thing would go down as well with the Murrah building. Let's see what people are saying here. Let's see. Rajneesh gang colors. Koresh was Seventh-day Adventist. That's right. America is not open to foreign cultures. We have become culturally closed since World War II. That is not true. That is not true. America is very, very open to foreign cultures. And in fact, if you go to Dearborn, Michigan, you'll see how open America is to foreign cultures, at least from a sense that the government is architecting or doing social engineering. And I, I've lived in California, and I grew up around people from other cultures, very diverse environments. We got along really, really well. It wasn't an issue. Just it wasn't that much of an issue. And I live here in Texas, and it's such a amalgamation of American culture, whatever that is, German culture, which still exists, and Mexican, Hispanic culture, and everybody down here gets along really, really well. I would say that is a misnomer, and in fact, when you look at the Cancerian part of the United States, it does represent the tired and huddled masses. That's very Cancerian. Like we're gonna take a lot of people in, right? Back in the 1970s, there were a large group of Russian Jews that came to this country because they believed that they were being politically oppressed. And a lot of them settled in the San Francisco Bay Area, and some of them became really dear friends of our family. So I would say, by and large, that's not quite true. That we are open to it, but I think what's happening now is that people are pushing back, and they're pushing back on whatever it is that the government is trying to just ram down our throats. I think it's an overall pushback, and it's like we've had enough. We don't want this. You're not doing enough to fill in the blanks, whatever those blanks are. And I feel like that's what's going on right now. And this is part of the Pluto and Capricorn story because I think it's important. And I think that we're going to have to come to terms with this because as we experience the entropic decline or the entropic decay of the Capricornian system, which happens to be ruled by governments and corporations, corporatism, which is really kind of the basis and definition of fascism, we're going to have to begin to look at, and I've talked about this before, how we're going to deal with either a society that is wanting to build greater superstructures and become a social dominator, which is what Pluto and Capricorn could be, or deciding that this is not a system that we really want to participate in and be a part of. Because we're coming to a point, we're coming to this it's not really a fork in the road, but we're coming to this event horizon. And somebody said that they just passed a big 5G bill that was going on in Washington. And that's really the plan. I mean, everything is kind of a huge distraction to some extent, because when we label, well, it's just a distraction. Well, that's true. It is a distraction, but they can also do a lot of things under the aegis of a distraction. So we could say, well, it's divide and conquer, blah, blah, blah. It is a Hegelian dialectic, blah, blah, blah. It's a distraction, blah, blah, blah. And use that as kind of a, force field to deflect the bullshit. But really, there are things that are taking place, even though those things are true. So even if they're true, we shouldn't just use them as a panacea so that we're inoculated from whatever's going on, because there is something going on. And I get it. We want to have the most kind of exalted view, and it's important to have that view, right? It's important. You want the macro and you want the micro. The micro is there's a lot of shit happening right now, and this country is in the throes. We are really in the throes of a cultural revolution, whether you want to admit it or not. However, the challenging part is that there's a strategy in the military. It's called the pincer effect. And it's when you have these two sides, they get closer and closer and closer and closer together. And then all of a sudden what happens is that you have completely closed off all the exits. And now you surround your enemy, your foe. It's called the pincer effect. And that's what's going on right now. We have a pincer effect taking place, which is difficult because on the one hand, we see the shouting, the screaming, the bloviating, the emotional, really, borderline insane variety of the left, okay? Which is, you look at that and you just go, holy shit, I don't want to be a part of that, because really when you look at it, it's just completely nuts. And you see the contretemps that are involved in the monkey wrenching and what they've been doing since 2000, okay, since 2016. So then what happens? So this is the left. So you move over to the other side, right? The other side is, of course, it's the right, it's the conservatives, it's the neocons, it's the Zionists. It's we stand with Israel because Israel's a nationalist state. And so we're kind of. It's like go over here now. It's like go over here. It's like that thing with Ted Cruz the other night. I mean, I thought it was deplorable. I don't care if he's Ted Cruz. I don't care if he's Beto O'Rourke. I don't care. If you're sitting in a restaurant, you shouldn't be fucked with. I'm sorry. That's my thing, right? So, but in that moment, what happens? I'm like, well, I'm sympathizing with Ted Cruz, and I really don't want to sympathize with Ted Cruz. I mean, he's kind of a drip. But in that moment, who am I siding with? This guy that's just sitting down having dinner with his wife, or the pack of nut jobs that are in the restaurant that are shouting at him, chanting at him, right? If that's true, I mean, they could be actors, could be set up. I mean, who the fuck knows sometimes, right? We've got Neptune and Pisces, but this is what happens now. So now the pincer effect puts me more in the Ted Cruz camp, thinking, well, I don't want this to be a reality. I don't want these people to be in charge. Look at them. Ted Cruz looks like the freaking grown up in that moment. You see what's happening? And these people on the other side, they already have their prescribed, their talking points, their governance points, the whole 9 yards. So the challenge is how can we wake up into this moment in time, this very crucial moment in time in terms of personal evolution and cultural evolution, and redefine who we are and what we are in the midst of a mind-blowing, transformational moment in human history, because you're here right now and you're on the front lines. Okay, the big challenging piece around all this is that unlike the 80s, that period of the 80s where we just had this really wide open portal of spiritual inspiration and tapping into the void and all that stuff, we don't really have that right now based on the outer planets. Neptune and Pisces is marginally interesting on some level, right? But I'm kind of over the glorification, the deification of the victim. I'm sort of over it, and I think a lot of other people are as well. Real compassion and real empathy can be part of Neptune and Pisces, but the manufactured and synthetic version of it leaves us feeling empty and hollow inside, rushing after yet another event that taps into our emotional body when we just absolutely have nothing left. Okay. So there can be, like, when I think when Uranus, about 3 years from now, 4 years from now, it gets kind of close into a sextile with Neptune, that can be moderately interesting in terms of spiritual energy. We've got Pluto and Aquarius coming down the pipeline, full time in 2024. And then Neptune is going to be going into Aries. I can't even wrap my head around Neptune and Aries. That's going to be a total trip, total mind blower. So what do we have here now? Where are our avenues of either salvation or transformation or tapping into these energies that can get us through this time? Well, first of all, Pluto and Capricorn, I think it's safe to say that nobody's going to come to our rescue. Nobody's going to come to your rescue. Disabuse yourself of that notion, even if you're a QAnon person. Okay? Because if I was a QAnon person, or if QAnon was involved right now, he wouldn't have let that shit happen. These people would not have let this thing happen in Washington, D.C. last week, unless, of course, there's some bigger piece, bigger picture. But, and if you're looking for that, go to Jordan Sather or Praying Medic or one of these people, because they're much more in tune with that world than I am. Okay. Now, I think there's a big day coming up, is in October 12th or October 21st. This is like sort of this demarcation where big things are supposed to happen with QAnon world. Keep your eye on the date. It's coming up really quickly. We're not that far away. We're about 2 weeks away. Okay, so I don't think anybody's going to come to our rescue. Disabuse yourself of that notion. So that means you're going to have to figure shit out on your own, right? You have to figure it all out on your own, but you're going to have to also figure out a way how to work with other people. That's really, really important, because the one thing we can't be or do during this time is feel like we're alone. That's one of the absolutely worst sort of positions a person can have. You're gonna have to have some connect. We have it right here tonight. We get here together on every Sunday night. It's kind of like my version of church. Whatever. You're here. Thank you for being here, by the way. And this is kind of a very, very small sample size. Very small sample size. And I know that I'm not the only person you people go to or watch on YouTube or connect with, or so there are other versions of this out there. And at some point, we're going to need to bring the out there in there. but nobody's going to come and help us. Disabuse yourself of that notion. And that's when taking personal responsibility for whatever it is you're going through, this is the big time. The big time, because we're redefining ourselves against these megalithic structures, right? That's what's going on. It's David versus Goliath. And, figure out where you are, at least momentarily. At some point, we get to play the role of Goliath, although we're not there yet. We're not there, but we will be. We will be. And then we'll be on equal footing. That'll be really interesting. Okay. So then we have Neptune and Pisces, which can be profound on a spiritual level, but there's so much to work through. It's like Pisces, Neptune and Pisces is almost like Pandora's box. And I'm sure there were some cool things in Pandora's box too. Probably wasn't only just, all these horrible things that were unleashed, which I believe is a metaphor for what happened in Atlantis. Like you go and look into Pandora's box and all those crazy creatures and all that shit. I think that was an Atlantean, a tale from Atlantis, an Atlantean mythopoesis that talked about these strange life forms and creatures because they were messing around with stuff, right? That's what was happening. You have these movies and these, was it The Island of Dr. Moreau? Was that at H.G. Wells? Where you have these half human, half animal life forms that Dr. Moreau is experimenting on. That comes right out of Atlantis in the realm of chimeras. But anyway, Neptune and Pisces, there can be some good Neptune and Pisces, but it's also really, really challenging. I mean, the one thing that I always come to with Neptune again and again and again, surrender, surrender, surrender. Either surrender to higher love or surrender to humility, whatever that is not a force you can direct, not a force. However, if you can get in touch with it, really get in touch with it at a certain moment in time in terms of an aspect. And by the way, we've got a pretty good aspect coming up this coming year when Saturn begins to move into sextile with Neptune. That's not going to be too bad. That'll be pretty decent in 2019. We'll get some of that. We'll get more of that in 2020 as well. And that could be an interesting energy with flow towards building new structures or bridges to new structures in our lives. And then we have newly minted Uranus and Taurus. And Uranus and Aries is so intense, and everybody was trying to just really get in touch with their power, their needs, their anger, their issue, their identity, their truth, whatever it is, Uranus and Aries, we got 7 years of that. It was very powerful. There are a lot of people who got theoretically woke during Uranus and Aries. This is where the red pilling starts. This is where wokeism starts. This is where, fourth or fifth wave feminism starts, right? Everybody's got their version of it with Uranus and Aries. So, Uranus and Taurus now is very, very different. It's about looking at things from a fundamental level and making changes at a fundamental level with your body, which is Taurus, your diet, which is Taurus, all these very Taurian nature, these aspects, right? Look at how you can radicalize and create something new and different around things that have to do with your body and nature and food, and the earth itself. This is where the activity is. This is where the sort of the big sexy is right now. It's with the earth. It's Capricorn because Capricorn's the earth. It's with the earth, with Taurus, and it's with, to some degree, this maelstrom of emotion, which ranges from the root to the fruit, right? From the alpha to the omega and everything in between. So these are the forces that are kind of generating, right, the potentiality of our time. Now, keep in mind, astrology is a system. It is a system, just like any other system. And there is a point of transcendence with any system. And there is a point in astrology where you can even transcend the system. And there's a potential for that. Okay. So when I say that these forces are in play, it's because we've seen them, we've experienced them. There is history where we can look back and see what's gone on before with certain aspects and trends. And yeah, we can see what's happening now. We can forecast in the future. That's how it works, right? That's how it works. But at some point, we'll all transcend astrology. And it may not be now. It may not be a year from now, 2 years from now. It may not be 10 years from now. It may not be 20 years from now. But at some point, we will transcend just about any system that we're dealing with. And astrology will be one of many. It won't be the only one, trust me. But we're here now. We're with it. And we can look at these cultural ciphers that are taking place for the outer planets. We're moving into Jupiter and Sagittarius. That could be a really, really good time in terms of some hope, some faith. I'll probably talk more about that as we move forward and get closer to Jupiter and Sagittarius. Doing a webinar with Heather Eland, Heather Marie. You guys know her, Persephone. She was one of my students. We're doing a webinar on the 20th of October, and I would urge you to sign up. There's a sign up on her website, and I have been so like not into Facebook this last week. I've just been number one. I've been super super busy, and I felt really good not going onto Facebook. It felt like I didn't have this kind of dominator all the time, and I wanted to feel what it was like without that dominator. And psychically, it took me about 5 or 6 days, and I cleansed a lot of stuff. And yesterday, I felt tremendous. And I think having a bit of a break on Facebook has helped. I got to get back on there this week because I do want to make this webinar available to more people. And Heather and I have a really nice energy, as many of you know. She's really good at the personal stuff, and I'm good at the big picture stuff. So that's going to be on October 20th. I deleted my FB account last year, deleted Twitter today. Twitter is venomous. I follow people on Twitter and I read stuff on Twitter. I don't post on Twitter unless I'm posting a show. Twitter, when I got into Twitter like last year, it was like a way for me in some ways to take cheap shots at people, and I didn't like it. It felt dirty. It felt common. There wasn't anything revelatory about it. There's nothing revelatory about Twitter for me. Nothing. So I just post links now, and then I read people on Twitter. Twitter is the bathroom of the internet. It totally is, man. It totally is. I mean, at least on Facebook you can exchange some ideas and dialogue with people. Twitter is not great. What do we have here? Hate feels more powerful than identifying with feeling afraid. No, that's true. Hate is a low level emotion, right? It's low level. Now, anger is different than hate. It is different than hate. And let's differentiate that. And anger is nothing to be feared. Anger is nothing to be feared. It is nothing to be demonized. Anger is a very, very real and profound state that we experience. We stay there all the time. It's not good for us, but it's an important state, especially if it's righteous anger. Then you can kind of move through it. But the only time it's righteous anger is if you're really fucking clear with yourself. Carrie says the American people could save the world in a sense if they would wake up, take the country back from the mic that terrorizes the powerless around the world. Amen to that, Carrie. Amen to that. We have become, and I love the people of this country. I love them. I just don't like one type of person. There are people in this country that are tremendous from all different groups and backgrounds and stripes. And believe me, there are assholes that are part of different groups and different stripes, right? They exist. And there are some wonderful people in this country. But what our government has done is really, it's not great. Well, I think what do we got going on? Like 50 different wars going on right now, or something like that. I am following the good people. Mute my preachers or trolls. Our thoughts manifest our future. Yep, absolutely, John. They do. Here's the problem, though. This is the one thing that we have to understand: is that we have found ourselves living in two separate realities. There's one reality that's taking place right now between me and you, and we're having a discussion, and more or less we're in accord. And that's one reality, and it's an interactive reality. It's a personal reality, and then there's a much bigger reality that's taking place that has to do with resources, that has to do with what else? Money, has to do with zeros and ones, it has to do with gold. I mean, it has to do with all these things that our lives only touch in many ways from the level of being a consumer, whether it's putting gas in your car or whether it's, playing with your cell phone, which has rare earth minerals in them. This is where we touch in to that kind of larger world. And here's what's happening. What's happening is that China is making a huge push, to basically connect the entire world through through their Silk Road Rodent Belt Initiative. Right? This is going on right now. It's a very, very big deal. Okay, so instead of building, which is what we should have been doing for a very long time, we should have been building. We should have been doing what China was doing or is doing 40 years ago, 50 years ago. No, but instead, what do we do? Well, we get in bed with corporations and we decide we're going to go in, we're going to put some lackey in to run a country. We're going to give them all kinds of shiny things, and then we're going to take whatever it is we want to take from them. The country itself will be bankrupt. The people will then wind up hating the people that we put in charge, and then there'll be a cultural revolution, and that's okay because we'll be on both sides of the revolution, and we'll say, well, that guy served his purpose anyway. Let's bring somebody else in. So this is what we've been doing for decades and decades and decades, and ultimately, it is going to catch up with us. It is going to catch up with us, and the people that are going to pay for it are me and you. We're the ones that are going to pay. And the problem is that we just have not had any really clear representation around any of this. Pretty crazy how groupthink has taken over. Never a single voice heard. Mob rule only how. Absolutely. I mean, we've gotten to this mob rule mentality. There's gang stalking, and the gang stalking thing has been going on, privately with people for decades now. Anyway, R. Mather says we're creators. We are creators, absolutely. And the problem is that we've been, we've been, how do I say this? Ghettoized or infantilized into thinking that we're not. The whole thing is for us to become totally dependent, right? On whoever it is running the show. And I don't care who it is, whether it's Obama or Trump. Because there are people that are infantilized with Obama. They didn't care. He hit all those marks for them. And every time he did something crappy or shitty, they just, turned their nose, hold their nose, turn their head, said it's okay. It's all right. I buy into it. He's better than everybody else. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing with Trump. And Trump has done some weird and interesting and bizarre things. Socially, he's a deconstructor. I totally get it. But to look at what he's done with a country like with Palestine and the Palestinians, and taking their resources away, I mean, you could just see the marionette strings on Trump, coming from the Holy Land, the Fertile Crescent, and you just look at him, and go, the guy's a puppet. He's a total puppet. And then we have Nikki Haley in there, she's horrible in the UN. Are you kidding me? This is not a woman that represents me, and she doesn't represent most of the people that I know. She's a shrill voice. She's an absolutely shrill voice that is creating just a cacophony of white noise. And so this is the real disconnect with what's going on right now. And we're gonna deal with it at some point. It's gonna happen. And it's either gonna happen because they're gonna want to move people into their little 5G, green prisons, or they're going to shut it all down and start it all over again. Either way, they got a plan. So you got to figure out where you are, how you're going to deal with it, because nobody's going to come and save our ass. This is all on us now. It's so totally on us. Uranus in Aquarius. Yeah, Uranus in Aquarius. That was a while ago, right? I liked that time. It was a very cool time. I had fun during that time. And spiritually, it was very enervating. Nobody begging for peace or freedom. There's no profit in peace. You see, that's the problem. There's no profit in peace. There's always profit in war, whatever the profit is, whether it's the military industrial complex, the buying of arms, or the rebuilding of cities and infrastructures by companies like Bechtel or Fluor or whoever, right? Raytheon. There's money, huge amounts of money in war. And that's why unless we have some kind of, reset that is, the sun goes out, or major electronic, EMP pulse on the entire planet. Unless we have something along those lines where we have a significant reset, I don't think there's any real way. Unless, of course, somehow, and here's the other piece now, let's leave a little bit of space for this, that somehow through our awakening, that we become both psychically empowered and profound with the resolute and requisite amount of personal responsibility and love. You see, when those two things happen, then all of a sudden we're in a territory that's a game changer, total game changer, so that we can actually use our collective and individual psychic energy, but it has to be balanced by the requisite amount of love and responsibility. Bottom line, because those are really powerful, powerful energies. Um, let's see what else we have here. How can we make war profiteering illegal? You know how we can make it illegal? Here's how we can make it illegal. You institute the draft. You reinstitute the draft. And then all of a sudden, when parents have their kids go into the army, and lots of them, not just sort of the quote unquote, I don't want to say they're the dregs of our society, but let's face it, when people just sign up for the armed forces, in a lot of ways, it's a way out for them. They don't have a lot of other options. Maybe they don't see themselves going to college. This is their way to, get some solids, get a GI loan, all that stuff, right? And I'm not blaming them for doing that. Okay. Some of them are often infused with patriotism. But if you reinstituted the draft and everybody's kids sign up, oh, I guarantee you there would be a hue and cry, and a lot of people would have a very, very different investment in war. Am I right? What about the astrology for the grand solar minimum? Well, do we have a date on the grand solar minimum? Do we know when that's coming? Do we know when the grand solar minimum is arriving? Is it going to be the Pluto and Saturn conjunction? Is that when it's happening? What do we got? Let's throw it out there, 2024-ish. That's Pluto and Aquarius. That'll be in opposition with the sun, won't it? I believe that the grand solar minimum has already started, by the way. Like we're just coming out of the true node in Leo, correct? And that's when we have the maximum effect of the sun, at least from a symbolic or astrological standpoint. So I think this last year and a half to 2 years with the true node in Leo, we've seen this kind of fluorescence of the sun, and I believe the dimming will begin shortly. To be honest with you, when we get into the next phase, which is going to be a lunar phase, right? We're going literally from the sun to the moon, and it's going to be a fascinating time. Really, really fascinating time. Tomorrow, by the way, when I do 15 minutes of flame, I'm going to talk about Me Too from a different perspective. I don't want to talk about it tonight, but I gotta hit into Me Too. That is, I don't think anybody's like covering right now. So, but I'm gonna save it for tomorrow. Every 11 years, the Earth and Jupiter line up perfectly. 11. Yes, you see a cat. You know who it is, Gina. Right there. There she is. She's the queen of the outdoor experience, Miss Rosie. Miss Rosie is my mom, non Sheila. That's who she is. The date already promoting a mini ice age. I think the Pluto and Aquarius piece will be interesting because Aquarius is in opposition to the sun, right? It's in opposition to the sun, and just from a symbolic perspective, Aquarius is much cooler. It's much, much cooler in terms of the sun. But who knows? Maybe they'll try to fire another rocket and start up Jupiter, make Jupiter the new second sun. When was Rosie born? Rosie was born in 2009. 2009. And I'm assuming she was probably born around May or June of 2009. Yeah. Give him another look at your face. There she is. Any thoughts on 2038 in the Great Pyramid of Giza? Yeah, I'll be 98. And for me, it'll be the Great Pyramid of Geezer. I'll be an old geezer in 2038. Those are my thoughts on 2038, the Great Pyramid of Giza. You know what? I tell you what, in all the honesty, I tell you what, Travis, I'll have a look at it next week. I'll put it on the calendar and I'll look at what's happening and I'll have a more informed view. Okay. How does that sound? Let's see. How heavy is my other cat? My other cat is a linebacker. He's a beast. Yeah. He's a beast for sure. Okay. Do you guys want to get into these charts tonight? You want to look at these charts? that I put up. By the way, John in the chat room is a very gifted cartomancer, and he provided me some information. Tim, I don't know why you're blocked. I haven't blocked you. I haven't done anything to you, brother. I don't have any moderators. I don't have anybody. So I'm not sure why you're blocked. If you are blocked, I apologize. There's Robert B. Robert Bonomo. Robert has, speaking of cards, he's got a film called The 21 Faces of God, which a lot of you have seen. It's a terrific movie about the tarot. And Robert and I did an interview a couple of weeks ago, which is actually a really, really good interview. So we've got a couple of celebrities in the chat room. And John Alexander, again, a very good cartomancer. John gave me some information. I think I'll try to share tonight. It's on my cell phone. The powers that shouldn't be blocked me too. I'm sorry, but I have nothing to do with that. That is nothing. I have nothing to. I don't flip any switches around here. I just hit, and I start the video, and then I end the video. Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we get into these charts tonight? So go on over to my website, robertphoenix.com. I got 3 of them. I have the Brett Kavanaugh chart, the Christine Blasey Ford chart, and I have their Synastry chart. Now, keep in mind, I don't know their birth times, so I'm sort of speculating a little bit here. I'm not doing a lot of hardcore rectification, but I'm trying to figure out something that sort of makes sense and fits. I'm gang stalked. Looks like someone else here is too. Oh, wow. I think we've all been gang stalked at some point in time. So why don't we go on over to my chart, my website? We can look at these charts because that's where I'm going right now, and I'm going to get into these 3 charts, and away we go. All right, the first chart that I have up here is Brett Kavanaugh's chart. Oh, you know what? I gotta change the spacing on this stuff. I tried to make him a bit the actual image is a bit smaller, but when I do, they don't. The text gets screwed up. Give me one. Here's the Virgo in me coming through. Okay, the Virgo is coming through. I'm just going to change. Just to see, I'm God right now. I just change a digit, and the world changes. Isn't that amazing? Just change one digit, and everything changes. There it is. Boom. Let it be, and so it is done. Here we go. Let me go back to that. Let me see here. Ah, yes. Much nicer. Much nicer. Order is restored to the universe again. Okay. So I wanted to start off with Kavanaugh's chart. Now, I took a stab at being a Capricorn rising. And I'll tell you why. Okay. Number one, he's really into time. You know, he's like this whole calendar trip, and he saves these calendars. To me, that's like Chronos in time. And where did he get that wonderful habit from? His father. His father. So I thought, okay, he's into time. The father played a big role. Then if you look at him, he kind of looks a little like a Capricorn rising. He's serious. And I bet he's got some kind. Does he have like a limp or something? Is there something like that's part of what Capricorn, right? Like people with Capricorn rising have some kind of minor deformity, like one foot's bigger than the other, or you know, one thumb is bigger. I mean, there's something on the face. It's not quite completely right. Okay, so I went for Capricorn rising. And there are a number of things here that actually pan out in some ways. One of the things that pans out is if you look at the moon, which is in Cancer, very feminine sign, right? Very feminine, but it's opposing his identity. So what we have here now is we have a lot of women that are opposing this guy's identity. And then Saturn, of course, is right in opposition with his moon. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where it is on his chart. We know that Saturn is in opposition to his natal moon. So we have this intense sort of Saturnian versus the sort of the Lunarian conflict. And this is, by the way, Brett Kavanaugh is a very sensitive guy. He's a sensitive. He's got some toughness. He's got a Moon Saturn trine, Sun Moon trine. So he has some toughness. He has some resiliency. But people, by and large, with Moon and Cancer, they're sensitive people. And I don't care where it is, if it's on the ascendant or what house it's in, it's still there. It's absolutely still there. Now, here's what's really interesting about this chart. So he's got Mars in Libra, and it kind of makes sense here because the midheaven is Libra, so it's about the scales of justice, balance, adjudication, and he's dealing with Mars near the top of his chart. He was an athlete. I'm sorry, he's got Mars in Virgo. He's got the Libra on the midheaven. My bad. Blasey-Ford has Mars in Libra, which I'll talk about. Okay. So he has Mars in Virgo, kind of a perfectionist, right? But he's got that Mars Moon square, which means he does have a temper. I mean, people that have Mars Moon squares can be explosive, and especially if they're dealing with women, right? I mean, this is the Moon Mars square. But he also has some patience too, and some forbearance with a Saturn Moon square. So it's an interesting kind of balance between the two. And he can go one way with Moon Sun Moon trine, and Saturn Moon trine, or he can go the other way with that Mars Moon square, which is explosive and angry. And Mars is retrograde in his chart. He's got 3 planets all at the top of the chart: Mars, Pluto, Uranus. Well, they're at the top because I picked this time. And they're all retrograde. These are retrograde planets. So it's all about going backwards. And if indeed I'm close with this, and I'm not saying that I am, but it just felt right, Pluto, Uranus in the 8th house, that's stuff that's hidden, tucked away, secretive, power, sex, things like that. Now, do I think he actually got on top of her and ground her? No, I don't think so. I really, really don't. I don't think this guy did that. However, there are probably other things about Brett Kavanaugh that he might have done that we don't know about. He's got a Mercury square to Neptune. He's got a Sun square to Neptune. He's got Venus squaring Jupiter, Mercury squaring Jupiter, Sun squaring Jupiter, Jupiter opposition Neptune. There's a lot of fluctuation there. Not a lot of stability, to be quite honest with you. One of the things that is kind of this underground rumor is that Brett Kavanaugh is actually gay. Like his college roommate is a an avowed, out there, loving his life, homosexual. So there's this little dirty rumor that it's not really about him and women, it's about him and men. And if that came out, boy, he'd be lionized. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be a script flipper? And he came out and said, I'm gay. That would be something, right? All of a sudden the left would love him. They come up and hug him. Oh, he's one of us now. First it was Jeff Flake and now it's you. Oh, no, that's not going to happen. But that might be one of the dirty little secrets here. I'm just saying. But I don't think he did I don't think he did what he said he did with Christine Blasey Ford. Okay, these people are blue blood, elite families. They either went to Harvard, they either went to Yale, one of the two, right? You got your Anthony Sutton, sort Hegelian dialectic stuff going on here, skull and bones. I mean, this is the sea we're swimming in with these people, all of them. Steve Pachenik has a video just put up on YouTube. It's fascinating. He went through each and every one of these people that are sitting up there, and it's like Harvard or Yale, Harvard or Yale, Harvard or Yale. And you get into Yale, you get into skull and bones, right? You get into skull and bones of Yale, and Harvard is the scroll and the key, I believe. So we're talking secret societies with both of these institutions. The other thing that I saw with his chart is he has a South Node in Sagittarius. I don't think that's great for a judge. I just don't. And it's in the 12th house, at least on this chart, and it's hidden away. And I can see the adjudication and the Libra and the scales of justice. But South Node in Sagittarius is not great for law. He's got that true node in Gemini. And again, if this is the remotely close to whatever his time would be. That would be a 6th house true node, which is working every day, being involved, details, writing, things like that, But doesn't matter. We can flip it around. We can change the time. He's still going to have South Node in Sagittarius, which I don't necessarily think is great for law. Now he's a smart guy. He's got Mercury in Aquarius, but sometimes I think he in the past has probably thought he was smarter than he might actually be, or he's given himself too much credit on some level, right? He's got a Jupiter square to Mercury square to Jupiter, which kind of inflates and conflates in how a person thinks about how they think. Okay, so he might have a much greater opinion around his intelligence some ways. Not to say that he isn't smart, because people of Mercury and Aquarius are generally pretty smart people, pretty sharp people, right? But there's something going on with that Mercury square and that Neptune square. And I'm not saying he did what he did with Christine Blasey Ford, who I, by the way, think was completely triggered during her testimony on Thursday. She was triggered, and she was literally traumatized to return to the state of a 12 or 13-year-old. And Emily and I talked a lot about this last night. We're going to be doing a show on this week as more of this stuff comes out, by the way. And she's Christine Blasey Ford, highly inconsistent. It's about everything. She doesn't even have a license to practice psychology. So she actually lied. She perjured herself. I know it's a small technicality, and technicalities only mean something when somebody wants to get over on somebody else. Now, by the way, Mr. Kavanagh, he's small fish. He's small fish. If what's happening here is he's being targeted and it's all politicized, and it is, you absolutely know it is, they don't want Kavanaugh. They want Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump. And while all this was going on, one of the things that you may not have been paying attention to is that a judge basically ruled that Trump can be sued. And it's the emoluments clause. So this is all getting lined up now for the midterms. It's all getting lined up for the midterms. And if he doesn't get through, and there's a blue wave that crashes, and I have some doubts about that. Robert and I talked about that. We looked at the chart. There's going to be a lot of chicanery going on with the voting. Bet your ass on that. I'd say Trump is a dead man walking. Dead man walking. That's my sense. That is my sense. Can he survive it? He's survived this so far. I mean, it's almost superhuman to think about what he's been through, whether you like the guy or not, whether you think he's doing a good job or not. Think about doing this for 2 years. 2 years. I know some of you have jobs, and most of you have jobs, right? Some of you are independent employed, but if you're at a job, you go through 2 years of absolute torment and hell, and everybody is throwing their shit at you at work, and you've got, thousands of other people casting spells at you, right? Do that for 2 years and see how your life is. And who knows? Maybe there's multiple Trumps. Who the fuck knows? But let's just say he's a human at this point in time, for the sake of an argument. That's hell. That is absolutely hell. So there's got to be something in whatever structure or life form this entity is right now that's either completely automatic, or it is so tenacious that it's like I don't know. Trump is like herpes; you just can't get rid of it, right? And I'm not saying that he is. I was just using an extreme kind of example. Who knows? Maybe they get rid of him. He'd be like the modern Rasputin, correct? Anyway, let's go back to the chart here. Neptune is on Brett Kavanaugh's Chiron, and this is a really interesting sort of activation, because when we get into Pisces, of course, we're talking about things like when was he born? He was born in 65. Right, so he's already gone through his Chiron return long ago, 2016. But we get into Pisces. It's the dialogue of the victim, right? It is suffering. It's taking on the sins of others. I mean, it's that Piscean energy is can be very, very heavy. It's sacrificial. It's scapegoaty. He's got Neptune on his Chiron, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, you should have used an astrologer here to pick a better candidate. I'm sorry. This guy's vulnerable. He's vulnerable in his chart. Look at this. He's got Venus in Aquarius, right? Where's Mars? Transiting Mars is at 5. He's got Venus in 8. This week, he's going to have a Mars-Venus conjunction in his chart, which is not always fun or pretty. It can be Mars-Venus conjunctions can be highly conflict-based. They can be. It's the masculine and the feminine, right? So I wonder if he's going to try to pull in some favors here. That may not happen until Mars conjuncts Mercury, and then there's that inconjunct with Pluto. So we're talking, what, about 2 weeks from now? It may be too late by that point. He's got Black Moon Lilith in Capricorn, and Saturn is close. It's close to Black Moon Lilith. It'll be there by next year. First quarter next year. Even if he gets on the court, I don't think. I mean, they're going to trump this guy. It's not going to end if he gets elected. I'm telling you right now. And I don't know what the week ahead portends, but I feel like they're going to move away from Blasey-Ford and focus on these other women, because in some ways, at least from a presence standpoint, they'll be more credible. Let's go to her chart. So I used Sag Rising for her. And the reason I use Sag Rising is because she has a very Sun in the 12th house kind of persona, doesn't she? Like, how much do we know about this person? And she could, oh, I don't want to travel. I'm afraid of planes. Give me my bottle of. Do you see her drink that bottle of Coca-Cola? That was, by the way, that was staged. That was totally staged. When people are there, she even said, I need my caffeine after I give my testimony, right? She had that look in her face. Sorry. Meanwhile, Kavanaugh's, you couldn't have had 2 more divergent personas. Right? I mean, she's got Mars in Virgo too, my bad. I thought she had it in Libra. I just have it up here near the midheaven. Anyway, I got her as a 12th house person, but that Coca-Cola moment was staged because I think she was triggered. I think they partitioned her off for that whole thing, so that to a person, you ask them, well, what did she look like? Well, she looked and sounded like a girl. How do you get that? You don't get it by the person taking acting classes and say, hey, look, we want you to go down to LA for a couple of weeks. Okay. You're going to spend some time with Sarah Silverman, and she's going to teach you. Oh, no, hold on. You're going to spend some time with Meryl Streep. It looks like you're going to get around 500 grand for a GoFundMe. Just give about, I don't know, 50K to Meryl. We'll call it a day. She didn't do that. She got partitioned. So what we had a 12-year-old girl. And Coke is not, doesn't Trump drink? He drinks Diet Coke, right? So was this like, screw you, man. Screw you. I'm doing the fructose. You could have that artificial sweetener. I'm doing the fructose. Who's got the power here? Now, the Coke thing is about adolescence. It's a teenage moment. And she almost drank it like with 2 hands. You watch her, so it's like, it's weird. It's just totally weird. It was a prop. It was a total prop to further this idea in our heads that she was helpless. Okay. So what I have here is I've got somebody in the 12th house, Sag rising, hidden, tucked away. Moon in Gemini. Hello. Split persona. Born on a full moon, by the way. She's a full moon kid. She's got that full moony face, doesn't she? In a lot of ways. But her split persona, split emotions, squaring moon square Uranus, moon square Pluto, but mostly Uranus, right? We got about 13 degrees square. It's 10 degrees with Pluto. Uranus piggybacking on Pluto. Did she go through something? She might have. I'm not saying she didn't, but I'm not sure she did it with this guy. And even if she did, she's got no memory of it. She doesn't know where she was. She doesn't know how she got home. I mean, it's a perfect MK Ultra kind of moment, if you ask me. But with the moon and Gemini, the emotions are split. But here's what's going on with her. If you look at her south node, you'll see it on the chart. Guess what? It's in Scorpio. Scorpio. What do we know about Scorpio? It is the underworld. It is about sex. It is about the shadow. It is about things that are hidden from us. Correct? It's about obsession. It's about compulsion. It's magical. It's occult. It's devilish. It's also very powerful. It repels. It attracts. This is the essence and nature of Scorpio, right? At kind of a fundamental level. She's got the South Node in Scorpio. She is in a South Node in Scorpio moment. Hello. 11th house. Again, this is my time. I just picked it. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's public, right? It's out there for all the world to see. I'm seeing it. It's on display. We're watching it on YouTube. We're watching it on straight media, conventional, old school media, new media, alternative media. It's all out there. Well, guess what? Here's Venus. Venus gets to 10 degrees Scorpio, and then it retreats and it goes backwards. So what are we talking about? Venus going backwards? Exhumation, more digging, more finding, more digging. And I guarantee you, there will be people not just inside the FBI. The FBI knows everything about this woman anyway. Are you fucking kidding me? Everything. What people don't know is that most people don't know, she happens to be Peter Strzok's sister-in-law. Let me see if I can get that right. Her Peter Strzok's sister-in-law. Okay, let me do this right. Peter Strzok's sister-in-law. So his brother's wife works for Christine Blasey Ford's brother. Hello? These people are so incestuous. They're so incestuous. It's just kind of one Truman Show gangbang is what it is. Are we going to find that out? And will it matter? Because really, even if we find things out, a lot of times it doesn't really matter. I mean, we can have like really great evidence. Really great evidence. I talked about this, when the election was going. I mean, Hillary Clinton could be eating on the part of a baby while she was talking to people, with the run up to the election. Nobody noticed. They wouldn't really even care, right? Dianne Feinstein basically blew this thing out. She leaked this to the press, and then she goes and lies in front of everybody and says she didn't do it. Bullshit. Total bullshit. And we see mopey Jeff Flake goes moping on over to his buddy Coons. Hey, come on. And they go through that magical mirrored portal, which separates them from the antechamber. They go out into this netherworld, this space in between. And it's there where they sit around, they look at their watches. It's like that scene in Fargo when they're negotiating for the undercoat and all that stuff. And William Macy goes, let me go talk to the manager. Let me see what I can work out. He goes back there. And he comes back out, he doesn't talk to anybody. Flake and Coons, his buddy, probably just sat there. Yeah, okay, let's go. They knew what they were going to do. Do you think they all of a sudden were just moved? Do you think Jeff Flake was moved by the young activists who got on the elevator? That whole elevator imagery, right? There's a lot of stuff around this that connects in with Prince, by the way, and the death of Prince. This whole purple thing, and then the elevator imagery with Flake. Everybody wearing these purple ties. I know it's like, red and blue makes purple. And oh, look, this Republican is coming over to our side, and we're the sane people. And now the Republicans look sane. He just wants to fuck Trump over. He hates Trump. He hates him. By the way, Jeff Flake is a Mormon. That's one religion that the United States government allows to happen. Is the Mormons. It's because they're like freaking high-level magicians, high-level masons too. That's what they are. You know that guy William Shenenblum? Remember him? I think he passed away. He's a very interesting guy. He was like this magus, and he did everything. He's got a very interesting story about Saturn. I think I've told it before. If I haven't told it, I'll tell you now. So he did everything. This guy. And at one point, he was doing some circle work, incantation, and he left his body and he went straight out of his body, went to Saturn. And when he was there in Saturn, there was this enormous being with like this enormous malevolent power. And this being took this rod and threw it, through the air, and it just pierced him right in the third eye. And he felt this excruciating pain and went hurtling back into his body. Right? I'd like to experience that. I say no thanks. No thanks. Anyway, he's going along. He's like doing all this stuff to become the super powerful magus. And one of his buddies says, if you really, really want to know everything, you got to study with the Mormons because they know it all. So, and he'd been through everything. So he goes to study with the Mormons, and inadvertently, he winds up discovering Christ through the Mormons, and it changes his life. And he leaves it all behind. He becomes deeply immersed in the Bible and starts to talk about this stuff. You should find his stuff. It's really fascinating. Very fascinating stuff. He's very funny too. I don't think he's around anymore. Anyway, it was the Mormons who were supposed to turn him out, but in actuality, he became a completely different person. And I think his life was better for it. But we've got this Venus right now in Scorpio, and it's moving backwards. So it's like going backwards in time, looking at associations, looking at relationships, what went on, who drank what, who was here, who was Mark Judge. Mark Judge, what a name, right? Mark Judge. Doesn't get much better than that. You got judgment, you got the mark. You got the mark of judgment. And that is Brett Kavanaugh's best friend. The mark of judgment. Can't make this shit up. Can't make it up. It's going to be an interesting week. With this, when Venus goes retrograde, I think it's what on the it goes retrograde at 10 degrees. It's so where's it at now? It's at 6. Let's see. Venus is, yes indeed. Venus, it's 10 degrees. So I think it goes retrograde. I've got the ephemeris. Hold on. I think it's this week. Yes, indeed, it's the 6th. So we're right now. It's starting to slow down. And let's see. It's stationing. Where are we? It stations on Friday the 5th, and then Saturday. So something's coming out on Friday. With Venus stationing, something's coming out on Friday. It's going to come out on Friday. And in between the time, we've got this Venus-Mars square, right? Where's Venus now? What's happening? Mars is at 4. Sort of the big square, the real showdown, is going to be on the 11th, 10-11. 10-11, 10-12. So that's probably another, hey, let's like bust out some info on Friday. I don't think this thing will be, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So John Alexander, who's in the chat room, he does the cartomancy stuff. He's got some interesting things on both Kavanaugh and Blasi. And then Robert Bonamo did a reading on a show last week, and he had some other cards show up, like the 10 of Swords and the Devil card. It hasn't really manifested yet. We got a whole nother week. We got delay here, massive delay. I don't think he's going to make it. And even if he does make it, they're going to turn him into another Trump, and they're going to go after him every single day in his life. They're not going to let him rest. And this is the message now. This is the message that's being sent. For those of you who dare enter into the public arena, if you have even the slightest smudge upon who you are, Any minor soiling of your spirit, we are going to come after you, and we're going to ride you hard. We're going to ride you hard. This is the message that's being sent. This is now the gateway to being elected, right? And there's nobody that's that perfect. There's nobody that's that perfect. Sorry. It's the way it is. All right, let's go to the final chart of the night. And this is the Synastry chart. This bloody mess, this bloody affair, is who they are, in the midst of the amalgamation of their planets. I mean, the thing that really, stood out to me, of course, he's got the Neptune square to Mercury and the Sun. Well, her Mercury is right there too. So it's a Mercury square, her South Node squaring his Mercury, his Sun. This thing is just messy. It's totally messy. If something comes out, it'll probably be with one of these other women. I guess they're focusing on this Ramirez woman, the Sweatnicki woman. She's not credible at all. She's got so much heavy stuff in her background that's easily accessible. She's not there. I think the one who's going to turn this thing will be this Ramirez woman. And again, I'm going to use this just from the perspective of a cultural cipher. She's a woman. She's Hispanic, Latina, right? And then there's a whole other kind of narrative that goes along with that. I'm just pointing out. Plus, he's got a South Node in Sagittarius, which means he doesn't really do well with people from other cultures. But this is kind of a mess here. Is there anything redemptive? Well, let's see. Her moon in Gemini is kind of close to his true node. Her part of fortune is on his true node. How about that? And she is profiting off of this, isn't she? Will she be able to go back and be a teacher at the end of the day? Of course she will be. Of course. Unless something comes out where she's completely defamed and everything is revealed for the way it is, a complete sham, and that they're all victims and they're all perpetrators. There's a profit from it. Victims can go back to their lives and they can get a cup of hot chocolate and a pat on the back and $500,000 in their GoFundMe account. It can work. So her part of fortune is profiting off of this dualistic piece in his chart opposing his non-dualistic piece, which is Sagittarius, right? Which basically takes the small little pieces and puts it together and makes it, a super macro whole. That's what Sagittarius does. But there's not a lot here in terms of, although I will say that there is a connection to some degree, the sextile with his Venus and Mercury, and the sextile with her Venus and Sun. It's not terrible, but clearly, if this was two people being in a relationship or starting a relationship, it wouldn't be enough to start a relationship with. Not hardly. And quite frankly, there would be too much here where I would say this would not be a good relationship at all. They both have that Mars in Virgo. And she's got that Mars Virgo conjunction. Mars Uranus conjunction. There's a lot. That's crazy, right? I mean, he's got the same thing, except his Mars isn't quite as. I'm sorry, Mars Uranus Pluto is really that conjunction. That's unstable. It's totally unstable, and it's opposing Chiron and Saturn. You always get the Uranus Chiron opposition. I'd say 90% of the time with Uranus Chiron, but Uranus Saturn, that's a heavy opposition, right? Saturn's the father. She's got some issues around her dad with that Chiron conjunction. Just saying. Her dad Ralph. But this is not a friendly chart at all. But if they came to me, they wanted advice for their relationship, I would say you would not make a good match. You should not be together. Although there could be some familiarity. They probably were friends. They knew each other. I mean, you can see that with the sextile. But other than that, no. It's a bloody mess is what it is. Bloody mess. And that moon square Pluto, her moon square his Pluto. That's like underworld stuff. That's Persephone. I don't know what's going on here. You know. But I don't think he had anything to do with her. That's just my intuition. And his Mars is conjunct her Pluto. That's true. That is true. Yes, it is true. And maybe. No. Because they both have Mars in Virgo and Pluto in Uranus. So it's this, if anything, if anything, it's a shared experience. It's a shared consensual, drunken, passed out, unconscious experience. No, I don't think he did it. I just don't. I don't. And then somebody even came forward. One of her friends who went to school with her. Of course, she writes for a right wing website. She's also one of the writers for the. Is there a TV series called Catwoman? I think she's a writer for this TV series. Anyway, she came out and completely denounced Blasey-Ford's character. It's a shit show. We know it, and yet at the same time, it matters. On some level, it matters. In fact, it matters a lot. What do you do with it? Well, you're going to sit back, you're going to watch it, and take notes around what's happening on the side and the periphery. This is always great for us to practice our awareness and discernment. It's a great skill towards that end. All right, let me check in with y'all in the chat room, see how you're doing. What do we got here? Let's access her lectures the past few years, see what she's teaching, how she thinks. Dry challenge, acting out the gender wars for us. Yeah, I'm going to get into this whole hashtag Me Too thing tomorrow. So I have another channel. It's the 15 Minutes of Flame channel, and I've got an idea about hashtag Me Too, and and I think it's at the very least provocative. Did Kavanaugh write the Patriot Act? I believe he might have been part of that. He was at the Brookings Institute. Yes. And Kavanaugh's not who he seems in a lot of ways. Like he's really tight with the Bush family. His wife was a secretary for Bush when he was governor of Texas. She helped run the campaign with Bush and Cheney. You know those guys. They're bad news. They're total bad news. Unstable. Yeah. She has PhD'd in psychology, but she's not licensed. She perjured herself. Maybe, no, I won't go there. What else do we have? Is to divert from pedophiles. Joan makes a really good point, because one of the things that USA Today has done is now they're smearing Brett Kavanaugh as a pedophile. How does USA Today get away with this? How did we get here? There used to be consequences for saying shit like this. Alex Jones lost his YouTube channel and a bunch of other, although he's back now. I don't know if you've noticed it. There are other people. He doesn't have his own channel, but there are people putting his shows up now. And FISA has gone silent. Trauma, music are never forgotten. It's true. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so she was tied in with the Bushes. He is too. The Bushes are really pushing for Brett Kavanaugh. And Brett Kavanaugh, I think, was sort of overseeing the mess that was part of the Vince Foster case as well. He worked for Ken Starr. I don't know. I'm not carrying water for Brett Kavanaugh, but I'm not a fan of the process. I think the process is bullshit. Total bullshit. How about a little love, little unconditional love tonight? Who's ready for a little unconditional love? Let's see. Why don't we give a little unconditional love to Jessica Stevenson? Jessica, this is your moment for unconditional love. We do this every Sunday night, just randomly. There you go, Jessica. There you go. Jessica Stevenson, unconditional love to you. If you want to share it with her, we do this every week. One person just gets it. It's free to give. It's free to give. Give it up. Let's give it up. Doesn't cost you anything. Doesn't cost you anything at all. And we could do that every single day, you know, every single day. Somebody passed me a random acts of kindness, little bag of chocolates the other day. Here you go, Jessica. There you go. Yeah, there we go. Doesn't that feel good? Doesn't that feel good? All right. We're going to take it to another level now. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Every single one of us right now is going to unconditionally love ourselves and everybody in this chat room right now. Let's all do it. Come on. Let's all do it. Come on. Let's all do it. We can do it. We can all do it. We can do it. We can do it. We can do it. Yes. 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 Start with Jessica. There we go. Charles says he's going to make it. I know in my heart Americans are going to rise to the occasion. Look, you know what? I'm pro process, Charles. I am pro process. And if that's the case, then if he makes it, I am pro process. I don't think this is a worthwhile process. I just don't. Because everybody on that fucking panel, the judiciary, pardon me, we just did unconditional love. Everybody on that judiciary panel has so much dirt on them, right? If we started pulling back all the stuff on those people, forget it, man. Look at that. Look at that. Look at the hearts, man. I love this. The symphony. This is great. I love it. This is totally great. Here we go. Love it. I love it. Love it. Thank you. See, I'm wearing my purple shirt tonight. Purple shirt. The flame of Saint Germain. Hey, let's go off on a high note, okay? Let's go off on a high note tonight. Let's go off on a. Let's see if justice will prevail. And more importantly, let's see if we can work with this energy of love in our hearts for the week ahead. I think, wow, I love it. Look at that. Yay. It's great stuff. Totally great stuff. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you. Thank you for joining tonight's broadcast. I'll be back tomorrow with 15 Minutes of Flame over on Robert Phoenix, different channel. We get into some hashtag Me Too. And have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Okay. And we're going to prevail. Okay. We're going to prevail. Just hold that in your heart. I know it's tough sometimes. I know it's challenging, but we're going to prevail. I'll give you one song that you can listen to. Will always lift you up. It's by Todd Rundgren, and it's called Just One Victory. If you ever get down, play that song. It'll turn your world around. Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining. And I'll see you tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame. Have a great week.